Welcome to the deep dive. We're tackling a stack of recent developments today, jumping right in to unpack the key information and, cut through the noise.
Sounds good.
Think of this as your essential briefing, curated just for you. We're combining surprising facts with the core understanding you need right now.
And we've got quite a mix today.
We do. Infrastructure, clean energy, maritime safety, social policy, judicial oversight, even the nitty-gritty of rail tickets and the upcoming census.
A lot to cover. Where should we start?
Let's dive in with something that unfortunately made headlines very recently.
Right. This first piece of news takes us to Pune. Specifically, June 15th, 2025. A century-old iron bridge near Kundamala village collapsed over the Indrayani River.
Oh, wow. A century old.
Yeah, it's a sobering reminder about the state of some of our older structures.
A British-era bridge that immediately tells you we're talking about something very old, potentially built without, modern standards or perhaps just lacking consistent maintenance over 100 years.
Exactly. And the Indrayani River, it's a popular tourist spot, especially near Lonavala.
Which likely means heavy footfall, right? Lots of visitors.
Precisely. And when an incident like this happens, you immediately see the National Disaster Response Force, the NDRF. They swing into action.
They're the specialists for this kind of thing, under the Disaster Management Act.
That's them, search and rescue. And you also hear the term salashim mentioned.
Which is the official term for government compensation.
Correct. Compensation for the victims or their families.
And the human cost here was tragic.
It was. 4 people died, including a 6-year-old boy, and 42 were injured, 6 of them seriously.
And it happened during peak tourist hours, which just makes it worse.
Absolutely. The source points pretty clearly to the cause. A structurally weak, rusted bridge that was, still in use despite the obvious risks.
So the immediate response, NDRF rescued quite a few people.
Around 50 people, yes. The injured were rushed to nearby hospitals, Pawana, Atharv, MR.
And the chief minister announced compensation.
The standard euro lakh for the families of those deceased, and free medical treatment for all the injured.
So, okay, beyond the immediate tragedy, what does this specific incident tell us about the bigger picture?
Well, it's a stark illustration, isn't it, of several persistent problems. Core maintenance of old infrastructure is a huge one.
Especially outside the major cities.
Right, especially in rural or tourist areas which might not get the same level of scrutiny as, say, major urban bridges. Then there's the pressure tourism puts on these fragile sites.
They weren't built for today's crowds.
Not at all. And crucially, it highlights potential failures in local enforcement. Were warnings ignored? Was there weak oversight despite known dangers?
It points towards a kind of governance challenge, maybe.
I think so. A challenge around implementing safety norms effectively and ensuring tourism is sustainable, not destructive.
So you mentioned governance failure, enforcement issues. What could actually prevent something like this from happening again? What's the way forward?
Well, experts are pointing towards several things. Mandatory yearly structural audits for all old infrastructure? That seems, non-negotiable, especially where the public goes.
Particularly tourist zones.
Exactly. And implementing, but also enforcing, tourism safety protocols. Things like visitor caps, maybe even digital warnings if an area is under stress.
And public awareness.
Definitely. Strengthening public awareness campaigns about the risks at certain sites. Using technology, too, maybe drones or IoT sensors could help monitor structural health in these high footfall rural spots.
Interesting. So modern tech for old structures.
Potentially. And fundamentally, there's also a need to ensure our legislation properly covers the safety of non-urban heritage or rural structures, perhaps linking them better to existing urban safety schemes like AMRUD or smart cities.
Okay, so it's audits, enforcement technology, and maybe legislative updates. Key things to remember from this tragedy. Indrayani River in Pune, the NDRF's crucial role, salashim as compensation, and the root cause being that structural weakness combined with overcrowding.
It's a sobering start. But maybe let's pivot from the challenges of old infrastructure to the cutting edge of new technology, specifically in clean energy.
Right. This sounds like some positive news coming out of Bengaluru. Researchers at the Center for Nano and Soft Matter Sciences, CNS, have developed what sounds like a potential game changer of a catalyst.
They have indeed. Now, to understand the significance, we probably need a quick word on electrocatalysis.
Okay.
It's basically using catalysts' special materials to speed up chemical reactions that are vital for clean energy. Think about splitting water to produce green hydrogen, or the reactions inside fuel cells that generate electricity.
Right, and the usual problem is cost.
Exactly. The best traditional catalysts rely on incredibly expensive precious metals. Platinum, ruthenium, you know the ones.
Which makes things like green hydrogen and fuel cells expensive too. The research also mentions MOFs and OOR, bit technical.
Right. MOFs are metal organic frameworks. They're like highly porous sponges at the molecular level, great for structure, but usually not electrically conductive. And you need conductivity for electrocatalysis.
Okay, got it. And ARR.
Those are the oxygen evolution reaction
Right.
and oxygen reduction reaction. They're key chemical steps in many clean energy processes that involve oxygen. Very important reactions.
So what did that's an institution under the Department of Science and Technology, right? What did they actually achieve?
They developed a catalyst based on nickel, iron, and selenium. Notice none of those are precious metals.
Ah, so potentially much cheaper.
Much cheaper. The specific material is Nix Farriers NC at 400. Quite a mouthful.
And the big deal isn't just that it's cheap, but that it actually works.
It works very well. In fact, it actually outperforms expensive platinum catalysts in one key area, the oxygen reduction reaction, which is crucial for making things like hydrogen peroxide efficiently.
Wow. Okay. So cheaper and better in some ways. How did they do it?
It's clever material science. They started with those MOFs for the porous structure. Then they use heat treatment, a process called pyrolysis, to make the material electrically conductive.
Right.
Then they added iron, that's called doping, to create more active sites where the chemical reaction can happen. And finally, selenium was added to boost the performance for both OER and ORR.
This sounds like it fits perfectly with India's big clean energy goals.
Absolutely. The fact that DST funded this research connects it directly to major national initiatives, like the National Hydrogen Mission that needs affordable, efficient catalysts for green hydrogen production.
Makes sense.
It also supports the National Mission on Transformative Mobility, which is pushing fuel cell technology for vehicles. And of course, it's a clear win for Make in India and Atmanirbhar self-reliance.
By reducing dependence on imported precious metals?
Precisely, for this critical technology.
So the relevance is huge, addressing high costs, improving efficiency, strategic independence. What are the next steps for something like this? Does it just go straight into use?
Well, that's the key challenge, isn't it? Scaling up lab breakthroughs to industrial production. The way forward really involves supporting pilot projects.
Real-world testing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Testing this catalyst in actual fuel cells or hydrogen production plants, encouraging collaboration between the researchers at CNS and industries in the energy, hydrogen, and fuel cell sectors is crucial.
And protecting the idea.
Yes, securing intellectual property rights, patents, and positioning India as a potential exporter of this kind of technology. And of course, continuing to invest in material science, R&D, and making sure the manufacturing process itself is eco-friendly.
Fascinating stuff. So key points. CNS, a DST institution. The catalyst uses nickel, iron, selenium, non-precious metals. It's important for OER processes.
Okay.
And it has a direct link to the National Hydrogen Mission.
Right. Now, from revolutionary materials, let's look at large-scale renewable deployment. We've also seen some significant progress in wind power recently.
That's great news. Karnataka specifically seems to have had a standout year, adding the most wind power capacity in India in the last financial year, FY 2024-25.
They did.
Just to quickly clarify for listeners, wind energy is simply harnessing wind with turbines. Installed capacity is the total maximum power a state or country could generate from its wind farms, and concepts like renewable energy clusters, pumped storage for grid stability,
Right, when the wind isn't blowing.
and offshore wind, that's sort of the next frontier, right? These are all part of the bigger picture.
Exactly. And Karnataka added an impressive 1,331.48 megawatts. Now, states like Tamil Nadu and Gujarat also added considerable capacity, but Karnataka led the pack for new installations this past year.
And this addition pushes Karnataka's total wind capacity up to 7,351 millidoya now. But they're not stopping there.
No, the plans are ambitious. Another 17 gigawatts planned, including 5 GUW within designated renewable energy clusters. And this is backed by significant investments in the necessary infrastructure substations, transmission corridors, RE zones.
What about the national picture? Where does India stand overall?
Nationally, India's total installed wind capacity is now around 51.5 GUW. That places us fourth globally, which is quite significant.
Fourth globally, okay.
The target is ambitious. 100 GW of wind power capacity by 2030. And a big chunk of that, 30 gigaW, is expected to come from offshore wind farms, which are still in the early stages here.
And this fits into the even bigger renewable energy target.
Yes, the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, MNRE, has set that overarching target of 500 gigaW of total renewable energy capacity from all sources by 2030.
Reaching these massive goals must require a lot of coordinated government action.
It does. MNRE sets the targets. Projects like the Green Energy Corridor are crucial for strengthening the transmission grid to handle all this renewable power. Policies are also evolving for faster clearances and promoting hybrid projects combining wind and solar, for instance.
And manufacturing. I saw something about boosting local production.
Yes, a recent report highlighted the need to significantly ramp up local wind turbine manufacturing. The aim is to reach an annual installation capacity target of 10 gigaW to meet that 2030 goal, really emphasizing domestic production capabilities at Medarbar again.
But there must be challenges still. It can't all be smooth sailing.
Oh, definitely not. The challenges are real. Finding suitable land and dealing with local resistance or land acquisition issues is always complex. Integrating large amounts of intermittent power wind doesn't blow constantly into the grid requires significant storage solutions, like batteries or pumped hydro.
And the cost?
Ensuring the price, the tariff of wind power remains competitive is vital. And successfully scaling up that domestic manufacturing ecosystem we just talked about is another major hurdle.
But the impacts, if we overcome these, are huge.
Undeniably positive. Major environmental benefits towards our climate goals, reducing the carbon footprint. Economic growth through jobs in manufacturing, installation, maintenance. It showcases federalism, with states like Karnataka really taking the lead. And it improves governance through better policy coordination and land use planning.
So the path forward involves things like engaging communities much earlier in project planning.
Absolutely. More community-centric approaches. Also, integrated energy planning, thinking about wind, solar, and storage together, not in silos. Building that robust domestic manufacturing ecosystem for turbines and components.
And policy.
Improving policy certainty and the ease of doing business things like land acquisition, clearances, tariff stability. And finally, transparent monitoring and public audits of how we're progressing towards these RE targets are really important for accountability.
Got it. Key facts to remember. India's 2030 wind target is 100 GW. Karnataka's total now stands at 7,351 milliW. India's global rank is 4th in wind capacity, and MNRE's overall renewable target is 500 GW by 2030. Oh, and the theme for Global Wind Day 2025 was Pawan Urja, powering the future.
Right. Okay, let's move from energy generation to another critical domain, maritime safety. A recent incident highlighted this.
Yes. This brings us to news of a fire on a container ship off the coast of Kerala. Maritime accidents, especially when they involve hazardous cargo, are incredibly serious threats.
They really are.
Fighting fires out at sea is inherently complex, needs specialized capabilities. In India, the key players are usually the Indian Coast Guard, the Indian Navy, and the Directorate General of Shipping, right?
Those are the main agencies involved, yes. And these incidents also underscore the risks, particularly near strategic choke points or busy shipping lanes.
So what happened in this specific incident?
The fire was on the MV Wanhai 503. It's a vessel flying the Singapore flag. And critically, it was carrying over 140 containers designated as hazardous cargo.
Hazardous cargo. Okay. That raises the stakes immediately.
Hugely. The fire started on June 9th, 2025, near the Askikal coast off Kannur in Kerala.
And the response, it seems like it was handled effectively.
It appears so. The response was well coordinated. The Indian Coast Guard, the Indian Navy, and tugboats hired by the ship's owner all worked together to bring the fire under control.
I read a detail about airlifting a tow rope.
Yes. That was quite crucial. A heavy steel tow rope needed to be airlifted onto the vessel by a Navy helicopter. And very importantly, the ship was then towed about 45 nautical miles further offshore, away from the coast.
To minimize potential environmental damage if things went wrong.
Exactly, to protect the coastline. The immediate danger seems to be averted now, and managing the actual salvage operation dealing with the damaged ship and cargo is the responsibility of the vessel's owner.
Does India have the capabilities for this kind of response?
India has been building these capabilities. The Indian Coast Guard is the mandated authority for search and rescue, maritime firefighting, and oil spill response within our waters. Their ships are increasingly equipped for these tasks.
And the Navy helps.
The Navy provides crucial support, especially for deep-sea operations or when heavy lift capability like that helicopter is needed. We also have a formal plan, the National Oil Spill Disaster Contingency Plan, or NOSDCP, which is overseen by the Coast Guard. And there are specific rules for handling hazardous cargo at sea.
This isn't the first major maritime fire response India has been involved in, is it?
No, you might remember, India played a key role in managing the fire on board the VLCC New Diamond, a very large crude carrier off the coast of Sri Lanka back in 2020. And DG Shipping plays the regulatory role, ensuring vessels comply with international safety standards for cargo and ship operations.
So, what are the key takeaways from this Wanhai 503 incident in terms of our overall preparedness?
Well, it underscores the continuous challenges of managing hazardous cargo safely at sea. It also highlights that while our response capability is growing, India still has somewhat limited deep-sea salvage capabilities compared to some specialized international companies.
Salvage being the recovery part after the fire is out.
Right. And it reminds us how difficult firefighting can be in rough weather conditions the monsoon season was approaching, which adds complexity. Interagency coordination, while effective here, is always something that needs continuous practice and refinement.
And the potential impacts that were averted.
Huge. A major environmental disaster was likely prevented. It tested and demonstrated India's maritime domain awareness and response readiness. It prevented significant economic losses from the ship and cargo, and it reinforces the importance of adhering to global safety standards.
So, looking ahead, how can India improve further in this area?
Building India's own robust deep-sea salvage capability seems like a strategic priority. Implementing real-time digital monitoring of ships in our waters, perhaps using AI to predict potential risks, could be valuable.
Or specialized ships.
Expanding the Coast Guard and Navy fleet with more dedicated firefighting vessels. Strengthening international cooperation is also key, working with bodies like the International Maritime Organization and neighboring navies, and ensuring coastal states themselves have robust preparedness measures, including regular drills and stockpiles of response equipment.
Okay. Key facts. MV Wanhai 503, Singapore flag, hazardous cargo, off Kannur, Kerala. Responders, ICG, Navy, DG Shipping, the NOSDCP framework, and the VLCC New Diamond fire as a precedent.
Right. Now, shifting gears quite significantly from physical security at sea to social indicators and policy on land, there's recent data on India's gender parity that's worth discussing.
Yes, I saw this. India unfortunately dropped 2 places in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report for 2025, now standing at 131 out of 148 countries ranked.
That's quite low.
It is. Just for context, the WEF index measures gender parity across 4 key dimensions: economic participation and opportunity, educational attainment, health and survival, and political empowerment. A score closer to 100% means greater equality between men and women.
And we should also remember the backdrop here includes the Women's Reservation Bill.
Exactly. Passed in 2023, promising 33% reservation for women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, but its implementation is linked to the next census and the subsequent delimitation exercise.
Which effectively delays it until potentially after 2029.
Right. So the new ranking, 131st. What's the overall score?
India's overall parity score is 64.1%. The report indicates this is relatively low, even compared to some other South Asian neighbors.
And digging into the details, where do we gain or lose?
Well, there were some slight positive movements in economic participation. Things like earned income parity improved marginally. Education and health indicators were relatively stable or slightly better. But the really sharp decline was in the political empowerment subindex.
Ah, that's where the drop happened.
Yes. Women's representation in parliament fell to 13.8%, and the share of women in ministerial roles dropped to just 5.6%. This continues a downward trend that's been observed since 2023, according to the source. This is India's lowest performing area in the index.
Now, the government has introduced various schemes focused on women and girls, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Mahila Shakti Kendra, and the Reservation Act itself is a significant legislative step, even if delayed.
True, those initiatives exist, but the source specifically points out a key factor that's often missing: statutory quotas within political parties themselves, obliging them to field a certain percentage of women candidates, especially in winnable seats.
So the core issues remain. Low female representation, despite women being roughly half the population. The delay in implementing the Reservation Act is a major policy gap. Political parties often seem hesitant, perhaps fielding women mainly in seats they expect to lose anyway.
And the result is chronic underrepresentation in our lawmaking bodies. The impacts of this are pretty significant, aren't they?
Definitely. Politically, it weakens democracy by not reflecting the diversity of the population it serves. Economically, it's a waste of human capital and potential. Socially, it can reinforce patriarchal structures. And globally, frankly, it affects India's image and standing.
So what could actually move the needle forward on this.
Well, fast-tracking the census and the subsequent delimitation exercise seems crucial to enable the Reservation Act's implementation sooner rather than later.
Beyond the legislation.
Encouraging political parties, perhaps through incentives or just public pressure, to adopt meaningful voluntary quotas for women candidates is key. Investing seriously in political training and mentorship programs specifically designed for aspiring women leaders.
And embedding gender perspectives in policy.
Yes, institutionalizing gender impact assessments for all new laws and government budgets, really making it standard practice. And maybe even exploring direct incentives for parties that demonstrate a real commitment to fielding more women in elections.
A multi-pronged approach needed then. Key facts to remember.
Yeah.
WEF Global Gender Gap Report. India's 2025 rank is 131. The overall parity score is 64.1%. The lowest subindex is political empowerment. And the Women's Reservation Act's implementation is currently tied to post-2029 events.
Right. Okay, let's switch tracks again to something many of us encounter more directly, railway ticketing. Specifically, the often frustrating world of touch call bookings.
Ah, yes, the perennial battle against bots and misuse in the Totcall system. Totcall, of course, is the scheme for booking tickets last minute, usually at a premium charge. IRCTC handles the online booking platform.
And the problem is essentially bots, these automated software programs that can book tickets incredibly fast, and also fraudulent agents who misuse the system for bulk booking, right?
Exactly. Aadhaar OTP verification is now being brought in as a key tool to try and verify the identity of the person booking.
And the scale of this problem is pretty staggering, isn't it?
It really is. According to the reports, something like over 60% of Totcall tickets are gone within the first 10 minutes of the booking window opening.
60% in 10 minutes.
Yes, often snapped up by these bots or agents before genuine passengers get a chance. IRCTC apparently sees around 83 lakh logins per day, and many of those are suspected to be automated scripts. On peak travel days, over 2 lakh tickets can be booked, potentially fraudulently, within just a few hours.
So what are the new rules Indian Railways brought in for 2025 to tackle this?
The major change is making Aadhaar OTP verification mandatory for all online Totcall bookings. No exception.
Okay, that's a big step.
It is. Also, registered agents are now barred from making any Totcall bookings during the crucial first 30 minutes of the window opening, giving individual users a better chance.
30-minute blackout for agents.
Right. And another interesting feature, users will now get an OTP alert sent to their registered mobile number even if an agent books a ticket for them at a counter using their details. So, more transparency.
The railways have been fighting this for a while, haven't they?
They have. They've reportedly deactivated around 2.5 crore suspicious user IDs over time, identified over 140 different types of fraudulent software tools used for booking, and arrested over 17,000 fraudulent agents just between 2019 and 2022.
Wow.
This Aadhaar integration is clearly part of the wider Digital India initiative, and it's worth remembering, Totcall, along with FlexiFare and Premium Totcall, actually contributes about 5% of Indian Railways' total revenue. So curbing fraud also helps protect that revenue stream.
So the relevance here is really about fairness, isn't it? Giving genuine travelers a better shot at getting these last-minute tickets?
Exactly. It highlights the ongoing challenges of cybersecurity in public service delivery. It also brings up that tricky balance between using technology for efficiency versus ensuring accessibility for everyone, including those who might find OTPs or online systems difficult. And the reliance on agents is still a factor.
What are the impacts hoped for?
Socially, fairer access and hopefully less black marketing of tickets. Economically, maintaining public trust in the system and protecting legitimate revenue. Technologically, it's about promoting the ethical use of automation. And from a governance perspective, it shows a move towards data-driven reforms focused on citizen needs.
What needs to happen next to make sure this works well?
Well, streamlining the Aadhaar OTP process itself is key, making it as smooth and quick as possible for genuine users, avoiding unnecessary frustration, strengthening the back-end systems, maybe using more AI and machine learning to detect abnormal booking patterns that might indicate new types of bots.
And helping people use the system.
Yes. Running digital literacy campaigns is important, especially targeting rural areas or older citizens who might be less familiar with these processes. Ensuring the rules are enforced uniformly at physical ticket counters too, not just online. And continuing to penalize the fraudsters while perhaps finding ways to reward ethical booking behavior.
Okay, key facts. Totcall window times are 10 a.m. for AC classes, 11 a.m. for non-AC. The key new rules are mandatory Aadhaar OTP and the 30-minute agent blackout, the scale of the problem. 83 lakh daily logins, 60% tickets gone in 10 minutes. And IRCTC operates under the Ministry of Railways.
Right. Now, moving from digital systems and governance to the workings of the justice system, we have news involving judicial oversight of FIRs.
Yes, this concerns the Madhya Pradesh High Court ordering an FIR, that's a first information report, to be filed against a state cabinet minister, Vijay Shah. This was based on alleged inflammatory remarks he made. Just to recap, an FIR is the initial report filed by police when they receive information about a cognizable offense, one where they can make an arrest without needing a warrant first. This particular case involves sections from the new criminal code, the Haratyanya Sanhita, or BNS.
Right. The BNS replaced the old IPC.
Exactly. And the concept of quashing an FIR is important here. That's the High Court's power, now under BNS Section 528, I believe, to cancel an FIR if it's seen as an abuse of the legal process or doesn't disclose an offense. Recent Supreme Court cases, like those involving journalists Vinod Dua and Arnab Goswami, have stressed the need for sufficient grounds and preliminary inquiry in certain FIRs, especially those involving speech.
So what happened in this specific MP case?
The incident dates back to May 14, 2025, when the MP High Court directed the police to register an FIR against Minister Shah. The allegation was that he made remarks targeting an army officer, Colonel Sophia Qureshi.
Okay, and the FIR was filed.
Yes, it was filed at Manpur Police Station in Indore Rural. It cited relevant sections from the BNS, specifically Section 152, which deals with endangering the unity of India, and Sections 196.1 and 197.1 related to promoting enmity or hatred between groups.
But there was something unusual about the High Court's reaction afterwards.
Yes, that's the noteworthy part. The High Court bench was reportedly quite angry. They stated that the FIR, as filed by the police, lacked material particulars, essentially. It didn't contain enough specific details about what was actually said. They even indicated the FIR could be quashed later on these grounds.
So they criticized the FIR they ordered.
It seems that way. And they took the unusual step of ordering that their own initial order directing the FIR be read as part of the FIR document itself. Furthermore, they declared that the court would monitor the investigation.
Monitoring the investigation? That's significant.
Very. It led to some debate because while attaching a court order to an FIR can sometimes be considered legally sufficient to provide context, the court seemed to criticize the police specifically for not incorporating the direct quotes or the specific substance of the alleged remarks into the main text of the FIR document.
So this situation really highlights the High Court's oversight role, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Trying to prevent potential political influence and ensure a fair process, especially in a sensitive case involving a minister.
Exactly. The BNS sections invoked are serious. It also brings to mind legal precedents like the Hajan Law case from 1992, which laid down clear guidelines for when high courts can quash FIRs, for instance, if the allegations, even if taken at face value, don't constitute any offense.
So the relevance here touches on several key issues: the potential for misuse of criminal law, perhaps for political reasons, concerns about police autonomy versus the need for judicial oversight. The court monitoring suggests a degree of mistrust in the police's independence here. And it really emphasizes how critical it is for FIRs to be drafted properly, with specific details.
What are the impacts?
Legally, it could influence how FIRs, especially sensitive ones, are drafted in the future, and the role court orders play. Politically, it obviously creates controversy around the minister and the government. Institutionally, it's about that delicate balance of power and trust between the police and the judiciary. What's the way forward to improve things in such situations?
Well, capacity building for police personnel and legal drafting, particularly for sensitive cases involving public figures or freedom of speech issues, seems important. Developing clear standard operating procedures, SOPs, for registering FIRs involving public servants might help ensure consistency and fairness.
And the judiciary's role.
Judicial prudence is key. High courts need to balance necessary oversight and monitoring with allowing police investigations to proceed without undue interference unless absolutely warranted. There's also talk about broader FIR reforms, perhaps using digital platforms with built-in compliance checks to ensure completeness. And ensuring transparency in court-monitored probes could help build public trust in the process. Right. Key facts. BNS Section 528 gives high courts the power to quash FIRs. The Bhajanlal case provides grounds for quashing. The MP High Court order of May 14th directed the FIR and later ordered its own ruling attached to it. And the minister involved is Vijay Shah.
Okay, another major administrative task that was recently reviewed at a high level is the upcoming census.
Ah, yes, the national census. The Home Minister reviewed preparations on June 15th, 2025, and a Gazette notification was expected the very next day. This is a monumental
It
exercise.
really is.
Mandated by the Constitution, it's conducted every 10 years by the Registrar General and Census Commissioner of India under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Traditionally, it happens in two phases. First, the House Listing Operation, HLO, and second, the Population Enumeration, PE.
And there's a new element this time.
Yes, a big one. The option for self-enumeration. People will be able to fill in their details digitally, likely through a mobile app or web portal.
A digital census, essentially.
That's the plan. The target is for the entire census process to conclude by March 1st, 2027, which becomes the reference date. The scale is just incredible. Estimates suggest over 34 lakh enumerators and supervisors will be needed on the ground, supported by about 1.3 lakh functionaries.
And besides the digital aspect, there's another major change.
Yes, a really significant policy decision. The inclusion of caste data. This hasn't been collected systematically as part of the main national census since 1931.
There was the SECC in 2011, but that was separate.
Exactly. The socioeconomic caste census was different. This time, caste data is planned to be part of the primary census exercise itself. And given the sensitivity, robust data protection measures are being planned.
This census was originally due in 2021, wasn't it?
It was, but got delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic and other administrative reasons. The digital approach obviously aligns with the broader Digital India mission. The decision to include caste enumeration was formally approved by the Cabinet back on April 30th, 2025.
And this data has major implications down the line.
Huge implications, particularly electorally, because this census data will form the basis for the next delimitation exercise, redrawing the boundaries of Lok Sabha and state assembly constituencies. That process is constitutionally frozen until after 2026, based on the 84th Amendment, but this census will provide the population figures needed when it happens.
So this census is relevant on so many levels. There are huge challenges.
Definitely. Data sensitivity and privacy are paramount concerns, especially with digital collection and self-enumeration. The Puttaswamy judgment on the fundamental right to privacy is highly relevant here.
And the politics of it all.
Absolutely. The political implications of releasing detailed official caste data are immense. It could potentially reshape policy debates around reservations, affirmative action, and electoral strategies for decades. The impending delimitation debate itself is critical, possibly shifting political representation significantly between states, particularly the North-South dynamic. And let's not forget the sheer logistical challenge of training and deploying millions of people with new technology across the entire country.
What are the potential impacts?
They span governance, providing crucial data for planning, resource allocation, and welfare schemes. Sociopolitically, it could affect the federal balance and deeply influence affirmative action debates. And technologically, it's set to be one of the world's largest digital data collection exercises ever undertaken.
So looking ahead, what's needed to ensure this massive exercise is successful and credible?
A watertight cybersecurity framework is non-negotiable. Encryption, anonymization techniques, regular security audits, all crucial. Extensive public awareness campaigns are essential, explaining the process, the digital options, the importance of participation, the inclusion of caste data, and actively countering potential misinformation.
What about reaching everyone?
Ensuring digital access and inclusion is vital. Providing support or alternatives for those without smartphones or internet connectivity, ensuring no one is left out. The delimitation process that follows needs to be transparent and involve proper consultation with states, and perhaps involving third-party experts or bodies for independent oversight to audit data integrity could help build public trust in the final numbers.
A massive undertaking indeed. Key facts. Census Authority is the Registrar General and Census Commissioner under MHA. Reference date is March 1st, 2027. Delimitation is due post-2026, linked to 84th Amendment. It's India's first digital census attempt. And caste data is set to be included systematically for the first time since 1931, barring SECC 2011.
Right.
Okay, let's shift gears again now to a really fascinating intersection of cutting-edge technology and biology, AI and biomanufacturing.
This is a really exciting field. Biomanufacturing, at its core, is about using living systems like cells, microbes, enzymes to produce valuable products, drugs, vaccines, biofuels, specialty chemicals, things like that.
And AI comes in how?
AI, or artificial intelligence, is starting to be used here to optimize these complex biological processes. It can help speed up drug discovery, design better production methods, even assist in predictive diagnostics.
Hmm.
You also hear the term digital twin used.
What's a digital twin in this context?
It's essentially creating a highly detailed virtual replica of a biological process or even a whole manufacturing system. You can then use this digital model to run simulations, test changes, and optimize performance without having to do costly and time-consuming real-world experiments.
And India has a strong base to build on here, doesn't it?
Absolutely. India is already a global powerhouse in vaccine production and generic drug manufacturing. That provides a solid foundation and skilled workforce. And India is reportedly making significant progress in integrating AI into this sector.
Yes, there are strong strides being made, supported by government policies like the National Biotechnology Development Strategy, often referred to as BioE3, which was updated in 2024, and the overarching India AI mission. Major Indian biotech companies are already starting to leverage AI tools in their R&D pipelines. But are there concerns? Does the policy landscape match the speed of technological advancement? That's the crux of the issue. There are significant policy gaps that need to catch up. For example, there isn't yet a specific regulatory framework in India for validating AI tools used specifically in drug discovery or biomanufacturing processes. How do you prove an AI's conclusion is safe and reliable for medical use?
Right, and data issues.
Data bias is a major concern, especially with India's incredibly diverse population. AI models trained primarily on data from one population group might not work well or could even be harmful for others. Ensuring data represents local variations is critical. There's also a risk of over-automation relying too heavily on AI without clear lines of human accountability if something goes wrong.
What about intellectual property? If an AI designs a new drug molecule, who owns it?
Exactly. The legal ownership of intellectual property generated purely by AI is currently ambiguous in most jurisdictions, including India. And India also lacks real-time oversight mechanisms similar to what the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, is developing, like their predetermined change control plan.
What's that?
It's a framework that allows AI models, especially those that learn continuously from new data, to be updated safely within pre-approved boundaries, without needing fresh regulatory clearance for every minor tweak. It acknowledges that AI evolves. Globally, regulations like the EU AI Act, passed in 2024, are already setting standards based on risk levels.
So what steps has the government taken so far?
Well, the BioE3 policy itself is important. It explicitly plans for creating dedicated bio-AI hubs and shared biofoundry facilities to support innovation. The India AI mission emphasizes responsible and ethical AI development across sectors. The Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023 provides a baseline for privacy, but it doesn't really address the specific complexities of AI algorithms processing sensitive health data in biotech.
But India's past strength, like in scaling COVID vaccine production, shows the potential.
Definitely. It demonstrated India's capacity in large-scale biomanufacturing. That provides a good base to build these more advanced AI-driven capabilities upon.
So the relevance here is massive. It's about overcoming challenges like regulatory lag, ensuring data quality and diversity, tackling complex ethical and IP questions, building effective real-time oversight, and staying competitive in a rapidly evolving global landscape.
And the potential impacts are truly transformative. Faster development of new drugs and therapies, more personalized medicine tailored to individual genetics, potentially reduced errors in manufacturing and diagnostics. It can boost the economy, especially in high-value areas like specialty chemicals. And it enhances India's soft power as a leader in science and innovation.
So what does the path forward look like for India to really capitalize on AI in biomanufacturing?
It requires developing adaptive, risk-based regulations specifically designed for AI tools in this sector. Not applying old rules to new tech, empowering our existing regulatory bodies like the CDSCO for drugs, DBT for biotech, ICMR for medical research, with the expertise and mandate to set and enforce AI biotech standards.
And the data and ethics.
Rigorous focus on data and AI model integrity. That means ensuring data used for training is representative of India's diversity and allowing for independent audits of algorithms. Establishing dedicated AI bioethics boards, perhaps involving diverse stakeholders to navigate the complex ethical considerations. And crucially, updating our intellectual property laws to clarify AI inventorship, protect open source AI development where appropriate, while still allowing commercial exploitation.
Fascinating and complex. Key facts. Bio E3 Policy 2024 focus on Bio AI, India AI, Mission Responsible AI, the DPDP Act 2023, data privacy, the concept of digital twins, the FDA's predetermined change control plan as an oversight example, and the EU AI Act 2024 setting global benchmarks.
Right. Okay, for our final topic, let's look at an environmental policy debate that pits clean air goals against economic concerns. It involves power plants.
This is about flue gas desulfurization units, usually called FGDs. Let's break that down. Flue gas is basically the exhaust fumes that come out of tower plant chimneys when they burn fuel, like coal. It contains pollutants, notably sulfur dioxide, or SOO.
And FGD units are the technology designed specifically to capture or scrub that harmful SOOs out of the flue gas before it's released into the atmosphere. There are different types, but a common one is wet limestone scrubbing, which actually produces gypsum, the stuff used in drywall as a byproduct.
Okay. So the news here from June 4th, 2025, was that a government committee, significantly led by the principal scientific advisor to the government, Ajay Sood, recommended rolling back the mandate that required power plants to install these FGD units.
Yes, that was the recommendation, rolling back a mandate that was put in place back in 2015 by the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, MOEFCC.
And what were the main reasons given for suggesting this rollback?
Primarily cost and feasibility. Installing FGDs is expensive. The estimate cited is around 1.2 crore per megawatt of power capacity. And the reality is installation is still pending in the vast majority of plants. Nearly 500 out of 537 thermal power plants hadn't installed them yet.
So compliance has been low.
Very low. There are serious concerns about how this high installation cost translates into higher electricity tariffs for consumers. One estimate suggested an increase of around Euro 0.72 per unit kilowattage. So worries about public affordability and also the project delays hindering implementation.
So the context is this 2015 MOEFCC mandate was quite clear. All coal-based power plants needed to install FGDs to curb SOE emissions, but the deadlines kept getting pushed back.
Repeatedly. The latest deadlines are now staggered between 2027 and 2029, depending on the plant's location and age. But as we said, compliance has been extremely poor. Only 39 plants had reportedly installed FGDs by April 2025. The total estimated cost for the remaining capacity is substantial, around 97,000 crore, according to the Central Electricity Authority, CEA.
This really brings up that difficult trade-off, doesn't it? The environment versus the economy, or clean air versus cost.
It's a classic environmental policy dilemma. So pollution is a significant public health problem. It's a major precursor to those dangerous fine particulate matter, PM2.5 particles, which penetrate deep into the lungs. It also contributes to acid rain and causes serious respiratory illnesses.
So the debate is stark.
Very. The long-term health costs associated with SO pollution versus the immediate capital costs of installing the FGD technology and the potential impact on energy tariffs. The situation is also complicated by fragmented enforcement of the existing rules and perhaps gaps in data about how SO pollution impacts very significantly depending on location, weather patterns, and population density near the plants.
What are the impacts if FGDs are widely implemented?
The impacts are clearly environmental, significantly reducing SO emissions, and health-related, reducing the burden of diseases linked to air pollution. But there's also the economic side. Potential long-term healthcare savings have to be weighed against the high upfront investment by power companies and the potentially higher cost of electricity, at least initially.
So how do you navigate such a complex debate? What's the constructive way forward?
Well, many argue there needs to be a renewed and serious commitment to actually enforcing the existing FGD deadlines, possibly with stricter penalties for non-compliance. Prioritization might be key, focusing first on plants located near major cities or ecologically sensitive areas where the pollution impact is greatest.
Can the government help with the cost?
Exploring mechanisms for central government funding support could be crucial. Things like viability gap funding, VGF, or issuing green bonds specifically for pollution control investments could ease the financial burden on power generators and state distribution companies. Implementing dynamic tariff reforms might also help distribute the costs more equitably over time or across different consumer categories.
And transparency.
Absolutely. Transparent monitoring, with real-time SOE emission data from power plants made publicly available, could build accountability and allow for better tracking of progress. And fundamentally, in the long run, the solution also involves accelerating the transition towards cleaner energy alternatives and exploring ways to gradually phase out the use of high-sulfur coal where possible.
Okay, difficult choices there. Key facts. FGD cost around 1.2 crore MW, FGDs remove SO, which contributes to PM 2.5, acid rain, and health issues. India has a large installed coal capacity. FGD compliance has been very low, around 39 out of 537 plants, and the new deadlines are pushed to 2027, 2029.
That covers the main point.
Okay, wow. We've navigated quite a range of topics today, from the stark reality of crumbling infrastructure like that bridge in Pune, highlighting the importance of maintenance, to the promise of cutting-edge catalysts for cleaner energy out of CNS, and the rapid expansion of renewables led by states like Karnataka.
We also touch upon how India responds effectively to maritime emergencies like the ship fire off Kerala.
Right. Then we examined the persistent challenges in achieving gender parity, particularly in political representation, as shown by the WEF report. We explored efforts to bring digital governance and fairness to things like railway bookings with the new TATCO rules, and the massive, complex undertaking of the upcoming digital and caste-inclusive census.
And finished with the frontiers of AI and biomanufacturing, the potential and the policy hurdles, and that ongoing difficult debate about balancing clean air mandates for power plants with the cost of electricity generation through FGDs.
It really is a snapshot of different facets of India right now, isn't it? You see innovation pushing forward, but also these deep implementation challenges, complex policy debates, and the human element cutting across absolutely all of it.
Definitely. And seeing these seemingly separate news items together in one deep dive really highlights just how interconnected everything is. Governance, technology, society, the economy, the environment. They all influence each other.
Absolutely. And perhaps the biggest question this deep dive leaves you, the listener, with is this. In a country that's simultaneously balancing such rapid technological ambition with fundamental infrastructure needs, deep-rooted social structures, and urgent environmental concerns, what is the most effective lever for driving real, sustainable progress across all these areas at once? Is it always top-down policy? Is it bottom-up innovation? Is it stricter enforcement? Or is it something else entirely, maybe a combination, something to ponder?